There's a town in America that no ambulance can drive to. If you have a heart attack, nobody can drive you to a hospital. If your house catches fire, there isn't a fire truck racing down a road to save it. If your child breaks their arm in the middle of the night, you're not calling 911 and waiting 10 minutes. Because this town has no roads. None. Not a single one. And here's where things stop making sense. This isn't an abandoned settlement. This isn't a ghost town. This isn't some forgotten outpost from the 1800s that nobody got around to tearing down. People are raising children here, right now, in a place with no roads, no ambulance access, no high school, advanced medical care hours away. And somehow, they've been choosing to live here for over 1,000 years. This town isn't in Alaska. It isn't on a remote island. It's in Arizona, right in the middle of one of the most visited natural landmarks in the United States. Hidden so completely that millions visit the Grand Canyon every year, and most never realize a town is hidden inside it. So, how do people actually survive here? How do you raise a family, run a school, handle emergencies, in a place where a simple broken leg can become a life or death situation? That's what we're going to find out. Most people think they know the Grand Canyon. Big, red, dramatic, a mile deep. You've seen it on screensavers. Maybe you stood at the South Rim once, took a photo, and moved on. That's most people's entire relationship with one of the greatest natural wonders on Earth. But here's what the postcards never show you. The Grand Canyon is not one canyon. It's a system, a labyrinth, a network of branching gorges and hidden side canyons stretching hundreds of miles in every direction. And tucked inside one of those side canyons, so narrow, so remote, so completely invisible from the main rim, is a valley. And inside that valley is a village. This is Supai, Arizona, the capital of the Havasupai Tribe. And you're looking at one of the most isolated communities in the United States. Now, before you picture a crumbling settlement barely holding on, stop. That's not what this is. Supai has electricity, running water, a functioning post office, a school, a tribal government that manages millions of dollars in tourism revenue. It is a fully functioning community, just without roads. Population, roughly 200 to 300 people, one general store, one cafe, one lodge, one elementary school, one health clinic. That's the whole town. The only ways are hiking 8 miles down a switchback trail, riding a horse or mule, or chartering a helicopter, if the canyon winds cooperate, which a lot of the time they don't. The nearest full-service hospital is more than 100 miles away by conventional travel routes. Much of the furniture, building supplies, and household goods used in Supai arrive the same way, by mule or helicopter. Letters, packages, prescription medication, government paperwork, birthday cards, all of it travels through the canyon on muleback. Tens of thousands of people try to visit every year. Permit waitlist stretch months, sometimes more than a year. For tourists, this is a bucket list destination. For the people who actually live here, it's just another Tuesday. But once you understand what Tuesday actually looks like in Supai, you'll never take yours for granted again. To understand why people live here, you have to understand who built this place and what they survived to keep it. The Havasupai people. They call themselves the Havasu Baja, in their own language, which is still spoken today, still being passed down to children today. That name means the people of the blue-green waters. They have lived in this canyon for over 1,000 years. When the Havasupai first settled this valley, there was no United States, no Arizona, no Grand Canyon National Park, no tourists, no screensavers, just the canyon, the spring, the water, and a people who understood, better than anyone alive today, exactly what this place was worth. Their system was brilliant in its simplicity. Every summer, they came down into the canyon and farmed the valley floor. Corn, squash, beans, all irrigated by Havasu Creek, a spring-fed stream that flows year-round regardless of how dry the desert above gets. Every winter, as the canyon grew cold, they migrated up to the plateau above, hunting deer, gathering plants, moving freely across a territory the size of a small state. Two worlds, two seasons, one people moving between them with the rhythm of the year. For centuries, it worked. Then the 19th century arrived. First came the miners, pushing through canyon country in the 1870s, carrying mining tools, new settlements, and a very different idea of who owned the land. After that, the railroad, then photographers, then writers, then tourists, pouring into the region in numbers nobody had predicted. The Grand Canyon became famous. As it became famous, it became valuable. As it became valuable, the Havasupai became, in the eyes of the U.S. government, a problem to be managed. In 1919, Grand Canyon National Park was created, celebrated as a triumph of conservation, a gift to future generations. Here's what that celebration left out. The Havasupai, a tribe that had moved freely across millions of acres for centuries, were confined to a reservation of 518 acres. 518 acres, at the bottom of a canyon. No rim access, no plateau hunting grounds, no seasonal migration. The rhythm that had sustained them for 1,000 years was declared illegal overnight. Imagine waking up and discovering that the way your family has lived for centuries, the way your grandparents lived and their grandparents before them, is suddenly against the law. That's what happened. Elders who had hunted the plateau their entire lives were told they no longer had the right to be there. Families who had split their years between canyon and rim were told, stay in the canyon. For 50 years, tribal leaders appealed to Congress, testified, wrote letters, made arguments, reminded anyone who would listen that their people had been here first. Most of the time, nobody listened. But in 1975, something happened that almost never happens in American history. Congress passed legislation returning over 185,000 acres of ancestral land to the Havasupai Tribe, one of the largest land returns to a Native American tribe in U.S. history. It didn't erase 50 years of loss, but it was something. And for a tribe that had been fighting that fight for half a century, it was everything. The Havasupai stayed exactly where they'd always been, in the canyon, beside the water, because that had always been home, and no act of Congress, for better or worse, was going to change that. Now, let's talk about how this town actually functions day to day, because this is where things get genuinely wild. Supai, Arizona is home to the last official mule mail route operated by the United States Postal Service. The last one in the entire country. Letters, packages, prescription medications, government documents, birthday cards, all of it loaded onto mules and walked 8 miles through a canyon. Here's how it works. Every morning around 8 a.m., the mule train assembles at the Supai post office. Mail bags are packed. Packages are secured. The animals, calm, experienced, completely unbothered by any of this, line up in single file. Then they walk 8 miles up the Havasupai Trail, through switchbacks, along narrow ledges where one side is solid canyon wall, and the other is a very long drop, past tourists who stop and stare, because nothing prepares you for the sight of a mule train carrying packages through the Grand Canyon. At the rim, outgoing mail is transferred to a postal vehicle. Incoming mail is loaded. The mules turn around and walk 8 miles back down. 16 miles. 6 hours, 5 days a week. In summer, canyon temperatures above 110 degrees. In winter, switchbacks glaze with ice. During monsoon season, the canyon floor can become a raging river in under an hour. Canyon guides tell stories of mule trains sheltering from flash floods that can transform the canyon in minutes. Water rising so fast there's no time to retreat, animals and handlers waiting on high ledges until the surge passes. He came back the next morning, finished the route. Now, the obvious question, why not just use a helicopter? They do, for emergency supplies, for things that can't wait. But here's the kicker. Canyon winds are unpredictable and severe. A helicopter schedule for a morning run can be grounded by afternoon gusts that appear from nowhere. In many situations, the mule train is genuinely more reliable than modern aviation. One more thing about the Supai post office that almost nobody expects. That postmark, Mule Train Mail, Supai, Arizona, has become a collector's item. Stamp collectors and postmark enthusiasts have hiked 8 miles into this canyon specifically to mail a letter and get that stamp. The most logistically complicated mail route in America accidentally became a tourist attraction. Only in America. Okay, here's where I need you to stop and really think about this. Everything we've covered so far, the isolation, the mule mail, no roads, that's fascinating. Impressive, even. But here's the question nobody asks until it's too late. What happens when something goes wrong? Not history, not postmarks. What happens when you're 3 miles down the trail into Supai, temperature at 108 degrees, no cell service, nobody around, and you slip on loose rock, and your leg snaps? What happens next? Sound extreme. Until you realize thousands of tourists attempt this canyon every year. Many of them underprepared, underhydrated, and completely unaware of what they're walking into. Hikers have collapsed on this trail from heat exhaustion. Tourists have run out of water before reaching the village. People have needed emergency evacuation because they underestimated 8 miles of canyon in triple-digit heat. This isn't a hypothetical. This is documented. This happens. So, what actually happens next? If you're lucky, another hiker finds you. They can't carry you. They can't call for help. They hike the rest of the way into the village and find someone. In the village, there is one health clinic. One, staffed by a small rotating team of medical professionals who fly in and out on a schedule. The clinic handles the basics: broken bones, lacerations, severe dehydration. But anything serious, a heart attack, a major head injury, a complicated medical emergency, requires evacuation. For serious emergencies, helicopter evacuation is often the only practical option. The helicopter has to be called, then it has to fly to the canyon, then it has to navigate winds that can shift without warning and ground any aircraft in minutes. A flight that takes 20 minutes in good conditions can become impossible in bad ones. There are documented cases of people waiting hours for a helicopter that couldn't fly, sitting in canyon heat, with a serious injury, with no real alternative. There is no road, no tunnel, no shortcut, just the canyon, the sky, and whatever the weather decides to do. Now imagine that not as a tourist on a day hike. Imagine it as a resident, a parent watching their elderly mother's health decline, a grandparent who knows their heart isn't what it used to be, making that calculation every single day, knowing that if something goes seriously wrong, the clock starts the moment it happens, and nobody can guarantee how long it takes for help to arrive. That's life in Supai. Not dramatic, not constant, but always there, always in the background. A weight that every family in this canyon carries, quietly without complaint, because home is worth it. Now, I want to talk about the kids, because this is a part of the Supai story that, once you hear it, you can't stop thinking about. There's an elementary school in Supai, runs 11 months a year. The Havasupai language is taught there actively to every student. In a country where dozens of indigenous languages have gone completely silent in living memory, where entire linguistic traditions have vanished because the last fluent speaker died and nobody learned, the Havasupai language is still alive, still being spoken by elders, still being absorbed by children who will carry it forward. That is extraordinary. Full stop. But here's where things get complicated. The school runs through 8th grade. Because there's no high school in Supai, most students leave the canyon after 8th grade to continue their education elsewhere, which means every Havasupai child faces a challenge that very few children in America will ever experience. They have to leave, not for a field trip, not for a vacation. Pack your things. You're leaving home, and you won't be back, not really, until you're grown. Think about what that actually means. You're 13 years old. You have never driven on a highway, never walked through a shopping mall, never navigated a crosswalk, or sat in a cafeteria with hundreds of other kids. The biggest crowd you've ever seen is tourists on the trail. The loudest sound you've ever heard is a flash flood tearing through the canyon at night. And next week, you'll be living hundreds of miles from home, alone, in a world that looks nothing like the one that raised you. Most students go to schools in towns like Peach Springs, Winslow, or Flagstaff. Some go to live with relatives in places they've barely visited. They navigate high school hallways, traffic, grocery stores with 50 kinds of cereal. A world so different from the canyon, it might as well be another planet. Some adapt, find their footing, graduate, go to college, build lives in cities. Some come back, return to the canyon, take jobs in the tribe, raise their own children in the village. Some don't come back at all. The world above the rim absorbs them. Every family in Supai lives with that uncertainty. Every parent who watches their kid walk up that trail for the first time, alone, backpack on, headed for a world they've never seen, carries something that doesn't have a clean name. Pride, maybe, and grief at the same time. That tension between the canyon and everything above it is the quietest, heaviest thing this community holds. And most tourists hiking down to see the waterfalls never think about it for a single second. But here's the thing. Everything we've covered, the isolation, the emergencies, the children leaving, that's the baseline, the everyday weight of life in Supai. The real danger comes with rain. Havasu Canyon is beautiful precisely because of its geology. The same limestone formations that give the water its impossible turquoise color also create a canyon system that functions, in heavy rainfall, like a giant funnel. When storms hit the plateau above, storms that may not even be visible from the canyon floor, every drop of rainfall drains into the side canyons, which drain into Havasu Creek, which has exactly one direction to go. Down, fast, with everything in its path. Flash floods in Havasu Canyon are not rare events. They are not once-in-a-generation disasters. They are a regular, recurring, expected feature of life here. 2008. A flood so powerful it permanently altered the physical landscape of the canyon. Entire sections of trail were ripped out of the canyon wall and carried downstream. Waterfalls that stood in the same location for centuries physically moved. Travertine formations built up over thousands of years were destroyed in hours. 2010, buildings filled with mud. Campsites vanished. Footbridges torn apart like paper. 2018, one of the worst in recent memory. Hundreds of tourists and residents trapped with one exit. The trail, completely underwater. Helicopter evacuations running around the clock. ATVs pushing through floodwater to reach people stranded miles from the village. Then, 2019, 2022, 2024. Think about what evacuation looks like in a place with one way out. The trail is submerged. The helicopter can carry a few people per trip and may be grounded at any moment. There is no road, no alternative exit, no calling for backup that arrives in minutes. Just the canyon, the water, and the people who live there, who have survived this before, and know better than anyone else how to rebuild when it happens again. Because every single time, without fail, the water recedes, the mud dries, the people of Supai walk out of their homes and start clearing. No waiting for outside help, just neighbors checking on neighbors, trails rebuilt by hand, homes repaired with whatever the mule train can carry in. Because the canyon isn't just where they live, it's who they are. And you don't walk away from who you are because the water got high. And then there are the waterfalls, Havasu Falls. That color you're looking at, that turquoise, that luminous blue-green that people assume has been edited, is completely real. The water in Havasu Creek gets its color from dissolved calcium carbonate, limestone minerals that leach into the water as it moves through the bedrock. These minerals change the way light interacts with the surface, producing a shade of blue-green so vivid that first-time visitors standing directly in front of it sometimes struggle to believe what they're seeing. It has looked this way for thousands of years. The Havasupai named themselves after it. Word got out the way it always gets out about something extraordinary. First, it was hikers and photographers, then travel magazines. Then social media arrived, and Havasu Falls became one of the most shared natural images on the internet. And then everyone wanted in. Here's where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. Every additional tourist brings money into the canyon, but every additional tourist also puts pressure on the very thing people came to see. The same waterfalls that made this community known to the world are now creating one of the tribe's most serious challenges. Too many people want to come. Permit applications crash the tribal website every year when they open. Wait lists stretch past a year. Infrastructure built for a modest number of visitors is now absorbing the pressure of global tourism demand. In a canyon with no roads and one way in and out, trails take damage. Campsites get overwhelmed. The delicate travertine formations that create those colors are sensitive to human impact in ways most visitors never consider. The tribe has to balance two things that constantly pull against each other. The revenue tourism generates, which funds a school, the clinic, the entire community, versus the preservation of a canyon their people have protected for 1,000 years. 7 elected tribal council members manage that balance. They set the permit numbers. They set the entry fees. They've closed the canyon entirely during flood recovery. They've raised prices and tightened rules to slow the pressure. No outside corporation overrules them. No national park authority tells them what to do. The Havasupai run their canyon on their terms, but the outside world keeps pushing. And managing that pressure from the bottom of a canyon with no roads is a problem no mule train can carry away. Before we finish, think about this. If every road in your town disappeared tomorrow morning, life would stop almost instantly. Deliveries would stop. Emergency services would be stretched beyond recognition. Grocery stores would empty within days. Schools would struggle to function. The entire system most of us depend on, without ever thinking about it, runs on roads. Supai has been making that reality work for generations, not as a survival experiment, not as a lifestyle choice that gets written up in magazines, as just life. Tomorrow morning, before most of America opens its eyes, the mule train will leave Supai. No app tracking the delivery. No algorithm optimizing the route. No GPS. No estimated arrival notification. Just the trail, the animals, the weight of the mail, and 6 hours of canyon. A community that had their land taken and spent 50 years fighting to get some of it back. That rebuilt after floods, again and again, without waiting for anyone to come save them. That sends their children into a world they've never seen every year, and hopes they come home. That kept their language alive when everything around them was quietly trying to let it fade. That built a tourism industry from the bottom of a canyon with no roads and runs every piece of it on their own terms. In a world obsessed with faster, easier, more optimized, Supai simply refuses to measure itself by the standards of the outside world. Tomorrow, the mule train will leave. Children will walk to school. Tourists will start the long hike down. The waterfalls will run the same shade of blue-green they've always run. And at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, in a place most Americans don't even know exists, life will go on, just like it has for the last 1,000 years.